Hey, it's about that time again. Mailbag time. Let's talk some Chiefs. Welcome to the Chief of the North on RGR Football. I am Seth Kaiser, the Chief of the North, and we are here for our weekly, semi-weekly. We do what we can. We're here pretty much every week, but every now and then the day job takes me away, but that's way too long a title for a weekly mailbag. Like we try to do every week here. You ask questions, whether it's in the comment section below or on twitter.com when I put out a tweet asking for mailbag questions every Wednesday. Or again, almost every Wednesday. Come on, bear with me. We're gonna use every as a colloquialism more so than like a reality here. It's a goal, not not necessarily what we managed to accomplish. You ask questions, I try to provide answers. Free agency's right around the corner. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. The Chiefs have not tagged Orlando Brown Jr. I actually, by the time you see this, you are going to very likely see up on the Chief of the North newsletter, where right now the top article up there is part 2 of If I Were Brett Veach, in-house free agents, who stays and who goes, right after a little fun with the salary cap and Brett Veach part 1. So you're going to be seeing soon, well, sooner rather than later, and again, maybe even by the time this is posted, there's going to be a film review on Orlando Brown. I went back and I reviewed, I think 7, maybe 8 games, every pass protection snap in those 8 games, to kind of just do a quick rundown of how his 2022 went through. It's not going to be quite as in-depth as his film review last year because we kind of know who he is as a player. Spoiler alert, he's pretty much the same guy. And that actually says something to me about what the plan should be regarding him. But you're going to have to go to the Chief of the North newsletter, read it, check it out. I wanted to really talk about how his season actually went outside the narratives, both for good and for bad, and how that colors my opinion of what the Chiefs should do with him. But I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that in these mailbag questions. And so let's roll right into them. I'm going to take as many as I can on a relatively limited time frame today, unfortunately, because I got to finish writing about Orlando Brown Jr. That's just the job. So I'm sure we'll be asked a few questions about him. So let's mailbag. Thomas Haslett, good dude, asks me, can DeAndre Hopkins play left tackle at a high level? Sorry, I couldn't resist. We had a long conversation about the DeAndre Hopkins trade rumors. And so I'm sure I'll have people ask me about that. So I'll just cover that. In terms of DeAndre Hopkins, the thing that makes him appealing right now is that he's got 2 years left in his deal with nothing left guaranteed. And if the team that trades for him, a team trading for him, they wouldn't be on the hook for every dollar that the Cardinals are currently on the hook for because of bonuses and that kind of stuff, dead money, etc. And so it would be a $19 million hit and a $15 million hit, in 2023 and 2024, from what I'm seeing on his contract. In the current receiver market, that's a good deal for a really good receiver, a really good deal, actually. But obviously, you've got to think about, his age, and you need to consider the fact that you'd have to give up some draft capital to get him. So there's a lot of hit and miss there. If he doesn't want to redo his contract, if he doesn't want to try to extend it out because of the age that he's at, I'd be all for the Chiefs grabbing him, but it would be somewhat price dependent. Rumors are it's a second-round pick. That's a little steep for just 2 years of control. I'd be agnostic on a second-round pick. A third-round pick, perfect. So it just really depends on the price. I would say that if the Chiefs are going to spend, let's say, somewhere between $13 to $16 million over per year to retain Juju Smith-Schuster, it makes sense to just go out and get DeAndre Hopkins instead, because you've got a shorter-term commitment there as opposed to a longer-term commitment. I'm guessing Juju Smith-Schuster's not looking for another 1 or 2 year deal. He's probably looking for something that ties a team to him for at least 3 years. He's probably had enough of this 1 year deal stuff. And Hopkins was, by my quick review, if they end up doing something crazy, I'll review his film in more detail. Hopkins was a better receiver last year. Now, obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster's a lot younger. So, again, there's a lot of considerations there. But really, if you're going to pay a not as capable receiver similar money, to me, the draft pick doesn't move the needle too much, because what you're paying for there is the better player. In theory, again, age can be tough with that sort of thing, but Hopkins looked good last year in my limited glances. So, man, that would just be funny just to see people react. Sam Hunter asks, Love your work, Seth. Well, that's a really kind way to start a mailbag question. And I love you too, Sam. Sorry, that made me think of what was it? Oh, Supernatural. Sammy. Very, very small niche of you will get that. Do you think it's now more likely the Chiefs keep Wiley since he'll be asking less than half of OBJ's price? I think whether or not they keep Andrew Wiley will depend entirely on price. Something to keep in mind. Wiley closed the year pretty strong. He had some really tough games. Andrew Wiley's I would say about an average right tackle, maybe a shade below average, and that's not an insult. It's hard to be that good at the NFL level. There are when you say average, I don't really know if there's 16 teams with above average right tackle play. So it's just a matter of understanding what you can and what you can't pay for that when you're going to have other guys on the line coming up for a payday. Also, though, if you're going to lose Orlando Brown Jr., which it certainly looks like they're going to, you don't really want to be replacing, your bookends. I would just say Brown is the harder of the two to replace. The left tackle Markle is not terrific. Whereas there are multiple guys, if you look at the right tackle market, there's multiple guys that can play at about an average level in the Chiefs offense. And so he's a little easier to replace, even though he's cheaper. And so there's, again, just like someone with the Hopkins conversation, it's a give and take thing. I would love to see them retain Andrew Wiley, but you got to make sure that you're not overpaying guys based on familiarity, which is always a hard thing to not do. So I think it'll be entirely price dependent on both of them, with them trusting their system and Andy Heck if they can't retain either of them. I'm guessing Andy Reid makes a bold move. Brett Veach, but Andy Reid, if you go back and our friends at the Kansas City Sports Network, Craig Stout, one of the OGs of Chiefs Film Review, he wrote about Andy Reid's history with left tackle. And if you look, Andy Reid has always spent to have a good left tackle. Started with Thomas, kept him around for like a decade, paid him good money. And once he was gone, they traded valuable resources for Jason Peters. And he was there until they got to Kansas City. They spent a first-round pick, the first overall, on Eric Fisher. And then when he went, they spent the equivalent, basically, of a late first-rounder, early second-rounder, to get Orlando Brown Jr. So they've always paid out to get a left tackle. I wouldn't anticipate this to be different. Snowman asked, does Mahomes make it easier for his left tackle or harder? Yes. Glad I could clear that up. Mahomes is unique to block for with the depth of his drops, and that can make things a little more complicated. But he's such a savant at escaping sacks that it's overall easier than it would be for a less mobile or more mediocre quarterback in terms of evading pressure. But he is unique, and it takes some getting used to as well. So he makes it easier overall, but there are ways in which he makes it tougher. Jeff Routledge asks, what is your best guess on what Brett Veach's plan is for both left tackle and right tackle? If I were a betting man, I talk about, big swings they could make, and DeAndre Hopkins would be a big swing. The one reason I have a hard time seeing it with DeAndre Hopkins is because I think they're going to make a big swing at left tackle. The problem is it's tough to make a big swing at left tackle. You basically have, you can try to trade for a relative star or good player, and you're going to be paying extra and probably giving him a big contract. There's a lot of conversation about Laramie Tunsil last year. The thing is, I think the Texans are probably going to take a quarterback very early in the draft this year, so it'd be weird to trade away your star left tackle at the same time you do that, unless they're just going full rebuild mode. It's hard to say. So I think that you're going to see some kind of big swing. It might just be a trade up in the draft for left tackle, and then they try to retain Andrew Wiley because, you get a cost control guy at left tackle. Now, the thing is, it's a different animal getting a left tackle in the draft than it is getting a guard or a center, because you need to get farther up in the draft, generally speaking. But you can still find a guy, in the 20s. It's just, you got to be cautious. It's going to be a QB heavy draft very early and some defensive players very early. And so maybe they have a guy that slips into the late teens that they really like, or maybe even early 20s, similar to Trent McDuffie for corner. and I can see them making a big play there. So I think that's more the splash move. I think at red tackle they retain Wiley if they can, price permitting, or they go out and they get there's a decent middle class of right tackles out there that I think could play well in the Chiefs system. John G. Miller says, curious how much he received help from chips and the like. You're talking about Orlando Brown. If a lesser replacement matters, if the Chiefs have to help a large percentage of the time anyway. Read the Chief of the North newsletter. That's coming soon. There's definitely some for a preview of that. As the year went along, this year especially, the Chiefs did help Brown more. And you see that in later games. And it wasn't necessarily just Brown. I mean, they helped Wiley more too. But schematically, in terms of how often they lined up in 13 personnel, how much they lined up under center with play action, how often they had tight ends chip on their routes before going out, how often they had running backs chip coming out of the backfield, how often they had moving pockets. That stuff increased as the year went along. You saw a little less frequency of just lining up empty, our 5 versus your 4 type stuff. They provided some help. Even, they would motion, a running back into the backfield from empty, where they'd have, a slot receiver deliver a shot from the slot. Like there was just different stuff that they did there. And that's one reason why I think with a talented rookie, I think they could get by personally. So then we've got a bunch, man. So many of you guys asked about left tackle. So if I skip your question directly, it's because I've kind of addressed it a little bit here. And this is kind of related to it. Colin Pittier asks, what's a tangible difference a good left tackle will make for Kansas City? Yeah, less pressures, of course. Oh, no, don't skip over that. That matters. That matters a ton. Some of the games where the Chiefs offense have struggled, it's not because Mahomes has taken 10 sacks. It's because he's been running for his life all game. And that matters when your receiver core isn't as dominant as it used to be. But does a great tackle mean PM15 completes 10 to 15 more deep passes per season, 30 more? Or is an upgrade going to manifest in more subtle ways? It'll be in the more subtle ways. It'll be in those deep shots. That actually is a really, really astute observation. You can dial up more deep shots when you trust your protection and when you have more receivers flooding the defense, which you can do a little easier, a little faster when you don't have to chip. So one of the things that Mitch Schwartz allowed them to do schematically for years was anything. They did not have to send help to his side. And he's still, and Schwartz would be the first one. He's a humble guy. I've heard him talk about this. He got some help sometimes. Andy is really good at not just with chips, but with designing plays to where there's a little room for error for his tackles in terms of where the pocket is, how the pocket's designed to be moved. But when you have a guy like Mitch Schwartz, and obviously, are you going to luck out like that, get a guy who deserves to be a Hall of Famer? Probably not. That's tough to do. But it allows you to do whatever you want, leave him on an island regardless of competition. It leaves game planning wide open and allows for more of a long developing passing attack in addition to whatever short game you want to hit. It helps the whole, threaten every blade of grass type thing. That's not just about the receivers you have or the quarterback you have. It's also about the offensive line that you have. And that's part of what a great left tackle can help do for you in conjunction with the rest of the line being very good, which the Chiefs' offensive line is, their interior line, I would say, is arguably the best in the league. So that does matter. And they're going to have to make some decisions about that. John Wesley asked, what sort of defensive tackle would play well across Chris Jones? Seems like Casey could use a high-end gap filler, especially if more teams start deploying Philly's QB sneak. I actually don't. I think the NFL is probably going to do something about the QB sneak soon. I also would say I wouldn't deploy a ton of resources to try to stop that QB sneak because there's not much you can do about it. That's one reason I think the NFL might do something because of that split-second advantage of knowing the snap count and being the one trying to just gain a yard as opposed to not giving up a single yard. It's just really tough to stop. I wouldn't deploy a lot of personnel resources to try to stop that. In terms of opposite of Chris Jones, you do want a guy who can chew up 2 gaps for early downs, but you definitely want another pass rusher next to him. And those don't necessarily have to be the same guys. They actually had a lot of success last year moving Mike Dana inside on more obvious passing downs and even not so obvious passing downs. And so I think it just varies. You're going to see some rotation in there next to him. One Husky dad. Hey, me too. Well, it depends what you mean by Husky. I put on some weight, but He says, Frank is gone. Brown just might be. It would appear Brett has been reading your newsletter. Any trade ideas you'd like him to know about? Yeah, sure. DeAndre Hopkins, Laramie Tunsil, maybe making a few phone calls about other available receivers across the league. Why not? And you know what? Every now and then, what is it, the expression about a stopped watch? And so I've managed to be right about a couple things this offseason. We'll see if there's anything else. Susan Long asks, compare and contrast Brown pre and during Chiefs. He was in a really different system with the Ravens. He was asked to do very different things, very, very, very different looking offense. Greg Roman's offense and Andy Reid's offense are not at all similar. I mean, they have 11 guys and a quarterback and an offensive line, but they're just not that similar. I would say, and again, like spoiler alerting, check it out. Chief of the North newsletter. It's going to be right up here. It's going to be right over the top of this. So if you go to minnesotachiefsfan.substack.com, you will see a little more on this. But what I will say is something about Brown that caught my eye in this year's film review is I think he was basically the same guy he was last year. And that's not a bad thing. That's not an insult. It just is fact, in my opinion, kind of the similar guy. So he really hasn't changed a ton as a player, which is both a testament to consistency, which is great, but he hasn't grown a ton. He was already a very smart player. And so maybe he didn't have as far to develop in terms of the mental side of things as a lot of young guys do, but he's relatively speaking the same guy overall. Henny Given Sunday. Hey, shout out to Chad Henny. Congratulations on your retirement. Thank you for everything you did for the Chiefs. I'm sure you were desperately waiting for me to say that. Henny Given Sunday says a lot of people don't want to stop gap tackle because there's concern Mahomes won't be able to play his game. Is there validity to that? To me, it seems like we've seen Mahomes overcome bad tackle play lots of times, including from Brown. And I think that's underestimating Brown's contributions, honestly, which is something I do frequently. Anytime I go back and review Brown's tape and actually chart for wins, losses, and neutral plays, pressures, hit, sacks, he's always better in the loss department than I expect in pass protection. It doesn't look pretty, but it's pretty consistent. I think we have seen Mahomes overcome bad tackle play, and Andy Reid can certainly overcome it. But there's a reason why Andy Reid has placed a big emphasis on having a good left tackle his entire career. Like Andy Reid's entire career for decades, he has emphasized having a good left tackle. So it does matter. Shin asks, is there any logical argument not to make Chris Jones a two-way player and left tackle, defensive tackle? If worried about fatigue, maybe he only plays third downs. With Chris's length, that I'd be curious what kind of left tackle he would have made. That could have been amazing. Chris asks, 2 years ago, Casey added Brown, Tooney, Creed, and traded the offensive line. A year ago, they added Juju, MVS, Watson, and more, and later Tony, wide receiver. What position group do you see getting overhauled this year, and are they free agents you like at the position? Also, what is the worst pizza? I don't think I've ever had a pizza that I thought was bad. I'm personally, and I'm going to offend some people here, I'm not a big fan of Jack's frozen pizza. Again, I apologize. There are many people who love it. I'm a Tombstone guy through and through. I think defensive line is going to get an overhaul this year. That's the one that I would expect to see. With some possibility at like the top end of the receiver group. Sarah, Chiefs fan. Hey, you have the same name as my oldest sister. What do we get in return for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or is he a Chief next year? I don't know if there's really trade value for him outside of maybe like some kind of, conditional 6th or 7th round pick. It is interesting if you go back and like watch week 1, Clyde looked terrific. And there's something to be said for narratives and how they spin back and forth on a player. And I think we're seeing that a little bit with Clyde. Jim, I'm sorry. Borgio, I feel like I've done this to you before, Jim. Seth, do you anticipate a broad-based Chiefs approach to the draft similar to last year, perhaps bunching some picks to trade way up into a primo spot? I could see them doing that maybe for a left tackle. I think Andy Reid has shown that he's willing to really to take risks in terms of getting a left tackle. And so we've got a couple more, just a couple more. I'm going to look for a couple questions that don't have to do with offensive tackle. Mike asks, rock, paper, or scissors? Which one do you choose first? Oh, rock, obviously. It's the strongest thing. Let's let's see. Darren Magadi, I'm not sure. What do you think an AFC team, say the Chargers, Bengals, or Dolphins, would pay in draft capital to move to the NFC? Would the Dolphins trade 2 firsts to swap divisions and conferences with the Saints or the Vikings? They should. That's a really interesting question. That's one reason I picked it out here, is that that would definitely make life to the Super Bowl a heck of a lot easier. That's why, these Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, what are currently, as I record this, rumors, by the end of the day, they might just be factual. It makes it so interesting, going from the NFC to the AFC it's a bold strategy, man, because that is just a gauntlet there in the AFC. Christian Gumminger asks, what's the secret to a perfect Tombstone pizza? I see that you would like to learn under my tutelage. Well, every oven is a little bit different, obviously. What's 400 degrees in one oven isn't 400 degrees in another oven. But here's what I would say. You got to do the same thing every time. Life is about routine. You're going to be the same guy every day, like Andy Reid. You make sure you fully preheat the oven. That's an obvious one. But not everyone takes the time to do that, because by the time you say, I want a frozen pizza, you're hungry. But you preheat the oven to 405 degrees, not 400 degrees. You make sure you use an actual pizza pan, with the holes in the middle of it there, to throw it on there. Not a stone, not just directly on the rack. It's got to be the pizza pan with the little air holes in it. You put it in the center rack with another rack about, knee high above it, because, see, that rack heats up too. Now, am I sure if that's true? Absolutely not, but I know it makes a difference. You throw it in the oven, you get it in there quickly, and you set the timer for 16 minutes and 15 seconds. At that point, you turn on the light in the oven when the timer goes off. You take a look at it. You're usually going to need maybe anywhere from 30 seconds to 1 minute, maybe, but you might not. That's why you got to set it for this time, because every now and then it'll overshoot. And you look for the cheese to be yellowing, not just melting together, but yellowing. That's when you pop it out, and then you let it sit and cool on the pan for approximately 5 to 7 minutes. Now, some of you like to eat your pizza really hot, and I get it, but that Tombstone needs that extra time for that crust to just crispen up a little bit. So that, my friend, is the secret to a perfect Tombstone pizza. And with that, I think that's all the time that we have. I really appreciate all you guys and all your questions. This is one of my favorite things to do on the job. I wish I had time to go through all 40 or 50 every single week, but I appreciate it, you guys. Make sure to do all the YouTube stuff. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, send Ryan a check. Whatever it is that you're supposed to do with YouTube, please do all of those things, because Ryan and the gang here at RGR Football deserves your support. I cannot wait to see what the Chiefs do. Hopefully the day job, I'm kind of out of this run of trials that I saw for a while there. And so I should have time to do a Monday morning maybe I'll switch to Tuesday morning to really look at free agency. We'll see. Who knows? But my plan is to be here back next Monday morning. I appreciate all your questions. If you have any mailbag questions, put them down in the comment sections or wait for the tweet next week. And in the meantime, it is a fantastic week to be a Chiefs fan.